My guest today is Dr. Rainer Zitelmann. Dr. Rainer Zitelmann is the author of New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. The foreword of his new book is written by Newt Gingrich. Rainer has doctorates in history and sociology. He has authored and edited 31 books that have been translated into 35 languages. His books include In Defense of Capitalism, The Power of Capitalism, and How Nations Escape Poverty. In recent years, he has written articles and been the subject of interviews in media such as The Wall Street Journal, Fox News, Newsweek, Forbes, Washington Examiner, National Interest, City AM, The Daily Telegraph, The Times, and numerous media outlets in Latin America and Asia. He regularly contributes specialist articles to economic affairs. Rainer Zitelmann, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you have a new book that's coming out in June called New Space Capitalism. Before we talk about that, I understand you have another book that has been released. Can you show that book and talk about that?
Yes, this is the other book, 2075, When Beauty Became a Crime. And yes, I have here a blurb from Jennifer Grossman, the CEO of Atlas Society, I think the leading global advocate of Ayn Rand's ideas. And she summarized it better than I can do in my book. Maybe I can read only these two sentences. Sure. In 2075, the war on inequality reaches its ultimate absurdity. Beauty itself is declared a crime. When the Justice Party brands attractive women as privileged beauties and forces them into optical optimization therapies, it encourages students and journalists to stand against them, the rising totalitarian regime. So this is, yes, this is a story, about an egalitarian movement. We know a lot of egalitarian movements in the 20th century. I studied them, like communist movements, but also the National Socialist movement was in a way. And this is a new kind of egalitarian movement. They go against very beautiful women. Every year, all women have to take a scan of their face and their body, and then artificial intelligence compare how they look with a beauty ideal. And if they fit more than 95%, they are classified as privileged beauty. And then they start to do things against it. For example, higher taxes, or they deduct grades at school. But then this movement becomes more and more radical, more and more extreme, as it is very often with totalitarian movements in history. And in the end, every beautiful girl in the age of 15 has to make a plastic surgery, but not to make them more beautiful, but to make them looking more average. And this is the story, but then there's a movement that goes against a beautiful student and a journalist, and they go against it, and it's the fight between these freedom fighters on the one hand and this totalitarian movement. By the way, it plays in the United States, so kind of dystopia about egalitarianism.
I was going to say, we talked about your book briefly before we started this interview, and I was going to say it sounds very Orwellian. So by any chance, were you a supporter of, unfortunately you can't see his picture, but right here is Dr. Ron Paul down here. Were you a fan of Dr. Ron Paul?
Yes, I am. And it's not, I would say, it sounds a little bit like Orwell, but there's a difference. When you read novels like Orwell, there is the complete dictatorship in the end. But here you see the development from a free society, how it becomes more and more unfree. So step by
Mm.
step by step. So
Gradualism.
this is the difference. And don't will say too much about it, but it's in a way optimistic how you can fight against it. It's you if you finish the book, you will not finish with depressive or negative or sad thoughts. But the main difference is that we have to understand how those totalitarian ideas start, how it begins, and then the process of radicalization step by step. So this is the difference.
Yeah, our I guess you could say enemy of freedom and free markets is using a strategy called gradualism, I believe. As you're pointing out, it's not something that they do overnight, but it takes time to be implemented. Let's move on to your new. Oh,
Wait
go
a
ahead.
second. Yes, you are right. It was like this. For example, in the Russian Revolution, it was overnight. Yeah, they took the power. They killed their enemies. But this is the old time of revolution. The new type, for example, as Adolf Hitler did it. He was first elected as a chancellor, and then step by step, in the first 2 years, he took more and more power, implemented the full power. And this is the difference. And this is, of course, in a way, much more dangerous.
Mhm. Yeah. So before we get through the whole interview without talking about the new book, let's talk about your new book. It's an important book. It's called New Space Capitalism. Rainer, what are the major points of this book?
So it starts with 2 or 3 chapters about the history of space travel, and I compare government-led space travel on the one hand and private space travel on the other hand. You know, the first moon landing, the Apollo program, it was more or less government-led, and it was a huge success, of course. But then there were 50 years of failure. You know, it's now 54 years ago that the last man landed on the moon. Now, NASA
Hmm.
was proud for flyby, but we still landed there. And so I have the question, why is that? Why did it happen? About the failure of government-led spaceflight. And I tell, for example, the story of the space shuttle, what was a total economic disaster when they planned it. They calculated with development costs of $5 billion, and for every flight between 5 and 10 million. In the end, it turned out to be $1.5 billion per flight, and they calculated with 140 flights per year. But in the end, there were 135 flights in 30 years. And then there were 2 accidents where 14 people were killed. And in 2011, the Americans had no possibility to bring their own American astronauts from American soil with American rockets to the International Space Station. The chapter title here is The End of the Future, but because this was really the end of the future, because the United States depended on old-fashioned Russian Soyuz rockets. Otherwise, they were not able to bring them to the International Space Station. And then did the NASA one good thing. They tried to cooperate with private companies, like, for example, SpaceX. But they called it at this time their Hail Mary move, you know, like you have it in football, Hail Mary. So the
Hmm.
last, usually it doesn't work out. But okay, if everything else failed, they had space shuttle was phased out. They had no alternative. They had to take with, okay, let's try it with this crazy private rocket people. And most of the politicians, they believed it's a crazy idea. And the woman who was in charge inside NASA for cooperation with the SpaceX, she reported that every week people came to her office. Oh, I'm so sad for you that you have to work with this crazy people. So, and like this way. But in the end, only 9 years later, America was again able to bring their own astronauts from American soil with American rockets to the International Space Station, but this time it was private. The Falcon 9 rocket from Elon Musk's company SpaceX. And I compare, for example, the launch cost. This is how much do you have to pay to bring 1 kilogram to space or in orbit. If you compare the space shuttle on the one hand with Elon Musk's Falcon 9 rocket, he reduced the costs by 95%. 95%. And one of the reasons is that he was the first to build a real reusable rocket. The space shuttle was not reusable. It should be reusable, but the maintenance costs were so hard. But Musk had used so far the same rocket 34 times. And of course, it makes a huge difference in pricing. Imagine if I will come in July, next July, to the United States from here, from Berlin. Imagine I could use the airplane be used only one time.
Right.
I think I had to pay, I don't know, $800,000 or whatever for the ticket. And of course, this makes a difference. And a lot of countries and state-led space companies in Europe, in the United States, Russia, and China tried to create such a rocket. But today they were not able, not a single country. The only one who was able to do it was Jeff Bezos from the Amazon founder. He has his own rocket company, Blue Origin, but he was 10 years after Elon Musk is successful. Elon Musk did it 10 years ago, and Jeff Bezos, I think, half year ago. So this is a story from the one part of the book, and the other part, I think we can talk more in detail about this. It's the future of space travel. This is what happened to understand, and I explain why private space travel is much more efficient, much more successful than government-led space travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, as you're pointing out with Elon Musk, the technology is becoming more efficient and more cost effective. And the title of your book is New Space Capitalism. So in terms of the capitalism part, how does space travel convert to economic prosperity? What does that look like?
Even today, space creates huge economic value. I think most people are not aware that they depend totally on space technology. Maybe you can try it with your ChatGPT and ask them, as a thought experiment, what would happen if all satellites from one day to the next wouldn't work? Nothing would work. Not your GPS, not internet, not the weather forecast, no TV, no banking system, no communication. Nothing would work. So even today, we depend totally on the space economy, in spite of the fact that most of people are not aware about it. But the pure future has much more of it. For example, now there are a lot of companies like Planet Lab, also SpaceX, NVIDIA, and Google. They prepare building data centers in space. This is the next thing, data center in space, because in space it's sunny all day and night, not only 12 hours. Always, it's much more efficient, and it has a lot of other advantages. It's not simple, but they use it, and this will be the next step. And then I talk in my book about the next steps, like space tourism, for example. Today, it's only for very, very rich people, space tourism. But this was similar in the beginning of usually, for flights, they were very expensive. Only very rich people could afford it, or with cars. before Henry Ford came, cars were only for very, very rich people. And so the next step will be like space tourism and especially asteroid mining, or in general space mining, asteroid mining. And then even I have a chapter, what is Elon Musk's goal? What sounds, of course, like science fiction, but colonizing Mars, settling Mars. His goal is, he has it even in his IPO prospectus now, to bring 1 million people to Mars. It's even in the, most people laugh about it. They think it's crazy, but think about one thing. If you think maybe it's pure science fiction, it's not 30 years ago that Elon Musk sold his company PayPal, and in his biography, you can read it, he was sitting on the pool with the swimming pool with some friends, and one of his friends asked him, "And what's next for you? What will you do now next?" And he said, "I think my task is to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization and colonizing Mars." And he said, his friend said, "You're totally crazy, bananas." So this was 30 years ago. But now I give you one number. In the last year, there were 324 rocket launches worldwide in total. 165 out of them were SpaceX. So if SpaceX were a country, it would be number one, far ahead of China that had 88. And for example, 20 times more than Europe. In Europe, we had 8 launches last year. Elon Musk, with his private company, had 165. Or another figure, we have 15,000 active satellites in space. 10,000 out of them are Starlink satellites, also from Elon Musk. And he's not the only one. There's another company I mentioned in my book. The name is Rocket Labs. It's founded by the New Zealander Peter Beck. And he had 21 rocket launches last year. So this is 3 times more than Europe. So if we laugh about it, maybe, yes, we don't know whether this will be reality. And I have some objections in my book, and I write also about the problems, not only about the opportunities. And I think later we will talk about it. But on the technical side, it's possible to reach Mars. I had a conversation with Harry Jones from NASA Ames Center. And he's, I think, 84 years now, and he works since 60 years in the space industry as a researcher with NASA. And he has a lot of knowledge. And he sent me a paper with a thesis. There are no showstoppers on our way to Mars. There are problems, but today we can solve all the problems on the technical side. And why it didn't happen, this is, I think we'll talk about it, one of the topics of my book.
So it's an interesting thought of people living on Mars. How do you think that would work? Would Musk become a realtor, or would that be sold through the U.S. government? Who owns the Mars surface? And then the other thing is, I guess you would be paying potentially property tax back to the United States?
I don't hope so. And the good thing, and the good and the bad thing is one. It's the same. According to the Outer Space Treaty from 1967, nations are prohibited to claim ownership over celestial bodies or land on celestial bodies. It's forbidden to them. It's crystal clear in the contract. Nations are not allowed, and I have no problems with this. But there's nothing in this Outer Space Treaty. How is it with private persons or with companies? Because at this time, in the 60s, no one thought about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, multi-billionaires who would be able to go to the stars, to Mars. So there is nothing. And there's a dispute among space lawyers. I have a chapter in my book, chapter 10, it's only about this topic. and there's a discussion. Some of them say what's forbidden for nations is also forbidden for companies. And the others say, no, it's nothing about it there. And what is not forbidden in the first place is allowed. So for private companies, it's allowed. So it's an open discussion now. I think it will happen. I'm an historian from my education, and it will happen in the same way as it happened in the history of America with this, the squatters, the settlers. They took the land. They didn't ask anyone. They took it, and later it was legalized, for example, with the Homestead Act from 1862. But the first was they took it. And I think if Musk, for example, goes to Mars, he will take not the whole planet, maybe, but maybe a manageable area, let's say the size of Singapore. The surface area of Mars is 200,000 times larger than Singapore. There's enough place for others. And he will take it, and on Mars there's no police and no one who could sue him against it. He could take it, and I think it will not work without it to finance it. And this is also my answer to the question, why haven't we make more progress in the last 54 years? Because there is so much progress in all other fields. Think about the internet and what happened. Why not in space? Why are we only able to fly by the moon? And when we landed there 45 years ago, first in 1969. And my answer is because if people do something, there has also always been a powerful reason to do it, a motive. And the motive in the 60s was the first space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. The then President Johnson put it this way: the one who will be first in space is first everywhere, and the one who is second and on the moon is second everywhere. So they had to win it. And there were 400,000 people involved in this moon landing Apollo program, 20,000 companies. It was 4.5% of the whole American budget at this time, but you can't do this for a longer time. This was like a wartime mobilization of forces. But then, in the moment when they put the flag on the moon, the wind was out of the sails. The wind was out of the sails. There was no reason to go on, and so nothing happened. Now they go again. Why? Because China plans. China said, we want to go to land on the moon in 2030. And then, the United States woke up. We have to go there. China can't be had. But this is not enough, Money makes the world go round, and I think this is also true for space. There has to be an economic motive. And asteroid mining, you can, I think, earn lots of money, because on asteroids you have a lot of platinum, for example, the PGM group, and also water. You have frozen water on asteroids. What's very important, not to bring it to Earth, of course, but you can make propulsion for rockets from the water, and so there are a lot of ideas. But it will start, I think, in the first place, it will start as a real estate story. And I wondered a little bit when I wrote the SpaceX IPO prospectus that there is nothing about it. I wonder why. Okay, maybe in the prospectus you have to write more about the risks for liability reason, and maybe the consultants told them don't write too much about Mars. It will sound like science fiction for investors. I don't know why, but I think it's a real estate story. Maybe I see it through the real estate lens, because I was engaged. I was busy 20 years in the real estate industry in Germany. But I think, of course, they will start then if Musk, for example, lands on the Mars, and he will claim ownership of area, as I said, for example, the size of or Singapore, or maybe even only Manhattan or whatever, and then start to develop it. I think he should bring it to the stock exchange, bring Mars to the stock exchange as a real estate investment trust, a REIT, and then everyone can buy shares. You, me, everyone. We can be everyone can be owner of Mars. And I think it's much better than the government being owner of Mars. It's much more, this is democracy for me. If everyone can be owner of a little part of Moon or Mars. And so maybe today it sounds like science fiction, but I'm sure about one thing. Socialism never worked on Earth, nowhere. They tried it in more than 24 experiments. In the Soviet Union, in another way, as in North Korea, or as in the East Germany, or Cuba and Venezuela, it failed without any exception. And why do people think what failed everywhere on Earth will work on Moon or Mars? This is ridiculous, I think. This is really
Yeah.
ridiculous. You have to have even a more efficient economic system there and not a less economic system. So it will not be possible. Space socialism is even more crazy than socialism on Earth. And so I think the future is space capitalism, or we have no future in space. This is the real alternative. And I hope that my book can contribute to this discussion. And I'm proud about two things. When I finished the book, I've sent it to the leading expert about the space economy in the United States, and this is Matthew Reinzio from Harvard Business School. And he recommended, he gave me a blurb that it's a standard textbook, everyone had to read it. And then I've sent it to Robert Suprin. Maybe most of our listeners will not know his name, Robert Suprin, but he's the man who gave Elon Musk the ideas about Mars. He's the founder of the Mars Society, the president of the Mars Society. He worked together with Elon Musk. So all his life, he's dedicated to going to Mars. And he gave me a blurb I was very proud of. He wrote, freedom will bring us space, space will bring us freedom, and Rainer Zitelmann showed us the way. So I was very proud about it because I have a vision about it. And I think I could do it because I combine it. I'm a historian on the one hand, I did always research on economic history, so I analyzed what happened in the past and so. But on the other hand, I was involved in the real estate industry, and I think it's very rare, and so I could combine all these insights.
Mhm. And again, we're speaking about the book New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars by Rainer Zitelmann. It's coming out in June, but you can actually you can pre-order the book on Amazon right now, which is something that I've done. And the foreword is written by Newt Gingrich. Now, Rainer, uh, do you think that capitalism, while it succeeds economically, does it fail to defend itself philosophically?
Yes, absolutely. Ayn Rand already criticized this many decades ago. And I think there are several reasons. The first reason is entrepreneurs are very busy all over the day. They have to create wealth. I was an entrepreneur for 15 years. I know you're always busy all over the day. The same time, the intellectuals paid with taxpayers' money in so-called NGOs or at the university. They have plenty of time for their utopia and for their things. And, they are very dominant in the media, in the universities. And so they are much more successful in influencing public opinion. And I think the problem is, I understand when entrepreneurs focus more on their business, and sometimes it's even uh, 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 dangerous for them to involve in political discussion.
Right.
The campaign against Elon Musk, for example. but I remember one thing. I was, I think, 3 or 4 years on an event of they're called Students for Liberty, and it was in Miami, and it was an interview with John Mackey, who's the founder of Whole Foods. You know, this Whole Foods, and then the president of the Students for Liberty, he praised him for um, giving political statements pro-capitalism, and for example, he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal against Obamacare. But then John Mackey said something: "I wouldn't do it again. I had so much problems from my company with all this leftists and all this woke people, and it was so hard." But of course, this is the result, and also I want to criticize in a way some of the wealthy, rich people, that they are not more active in defending capitalism. Take me an example. You know, I write my books all over the day, but you can't earn money even if my books are published in more than 30 countries. Book writing is not a way to earn a lot of money. I promoted my books all over the world. I've been in 30 countries, but the flight costs, and no one paid it for me. And it was much more than I could earn with my books. But I did it because I have a message, and I commissioned a poll about the image of capitalism, about the image of rich people. It's the worldwide biggest poll. It cost me $700,000. I paid it from my own pockets. I could afford it because I was a successful entrepreneur. But I can't go on with this because otherwise my next book would be How to Become Poor with Promoting Capitalism. I don't think that anyone would like to read this book. So I would like, I asked people I know a lot of rich people, even billionaires, to support me, and I got a little bit, yes. So, for example, I produced films. By the way, you can watch my films for free on YouTube. One film is Poland from Socialism to Prosperity. Another film is Life Behind the Berlin Wall, East and West Germany. Another one is Vietnam, Beating Poverty with Market Economy. I do now every year films. So I found an entrepreneur who gave me some money for these films. But so this is the problem. I know some of these think tanks all over the world who try to defend capitalism, but they have all the same problem, that they don't have enough money, because even these things you can't do without money. And the left-leaning think tanks, they have much more money, but they got it from the government. In Germany, we have this problem. They pay hundreds and hundreds of millions from the government for so-called so-called NGOs, or non-government organization. But for me, someone who gets a lot of money from the government, it's not longer a non-government organization. It's a fake. I write the N always in speech marks because it's not true. It's not none. And so yes, you're right. And this is the reason why I'm writing my books, and to reach people. But of course, a lot of people, unfortunately, today they don't read books. So I started to produce these documentaries on YouTube. And I wrote this novel we talked about, 2075, When Beauty Became a Crime. And my real goal is to have a feature film. If someone listens to us who has any connections to Netflix or Hollywood or whoever, please contact me, because I'm looking for someone to make a feature film from this book, 2075, because I think the mistake from pro-capitalists, we have a lot of facts. Yes, my books are full of facts, but people don't decide only according to facts. We are all people with emotion. And this is the reason why Ayn Rand was much more successful with her books, or she reached much more people. For example, I admire Milton Friedman and I admire Hayek, but Milton Friedman sold from his great book, Capitalism and Freedom, 1 million copies. Ayn Rand sold from her books 37 million because she wrote novels.
Mhm.
And with novels, you can more appeal to emotion and even reach women. The readers of my book, 80% men. So this is the reason why I wrote now this novel to also, we have to reach also women who are more sometimes on the emotional side. So you are absolutely correct. Capitalism is economically so successful, and I will give you only one number. 200 years ago, before capitalism, 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. 90%. Today, it's less than 10%. I think it's amazing. It's a success story. And, uh, and to blame capitalism for poverty and to brave socialism for prosperity, you have to be a public relation genius, a marketing genius. So I believe leftists, they are the real public relation genius, marketing genius. We could learn a lot from them in this way.
Yeah, here in the United States, anywhere where there's a city government or a state that leans towards socialism, it's a disaster. So I think that's living proof right there. You mentioned wealthy people, and I will say sometimes wealthy people like to be in the corner, at least politically and visually, because of the fact that they're so demonized by the left. There's this envy going on about the people. And then my last point on your other comment about Ayn Rand is storytelling is very effective. I'm a Christian, so I know Jesus in the Bible told parables. I think people take to heart things that are told in story form that sometimes their mind glosses over when it comes through as a fact. But it nonetheless, it doesn't take away from the truth that your books and your work is doing. Um, so
I'm so
for
sorry when I interrupt you, but this
no,
is
go
so
ahead.
amazing. I never thought about it. That imagine as a thought experiment, the Bible would be a book, a nonfiction book with facts.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be successful. It's I never thought about it, but it's storytelling.
Uh-huh.
And if you uh, mention you're a Christian, I have good news. You should definitely order this book because I told you that there's a movement going against this totalitarian egalitarian. And this movement, there are two groups, Christians and libertarians.
Mhm.
I think you will like it. These are the two groups
Oh yeah.
who join together to go against it. Different motives, but they have each have their motives, but they join together to go against this. So I really think you could like it. Yes,
Oh,
and
definitely.
envy is also, yes, this is an important topic that you mentioned. Envy, in the Christian religion, envy is one of the seven sins,
Mhm.
and the socialists, they were very successful to rebrand envy. Now they call it social justice. So it's uh, like you have a poisoned drink or bottle, and before it was labeled envy, and now you label it social justice, and people like to drink it. And the Christians, they know that envy is a part of us. It's
Mhm.
envy exists as long as men kind, but they try to do something against being too envious. They marked it as a sin. But socialists, they fuel envy. They make it even stronger because they learned that they can win voters because there are a lot of envious people and they, oh, look at the rich. They have so much. You are only so poor because the rich are so rich. And envy is a very important topic. And this other book, When Beauty Became a Crime, it's a book about envy. Usually there are envious against rich people, but in this book there are envious against beautiful women. It's the
Mhm.
same. If you replace this beautiful woman with rich people, you know what the story is about. But so it's more funny in a way if they go against this super beautiful women.
Rainer, you're well respected and you have such a great mind, and you think you've added uh, dozens of IQ points to this show today. So, when you've studied success and wealth, and you've actually interviewed successful people, um, ha- has that changed your own view of happiness and meaning?
Yes, in a way, I think some some people think happiness is a result from or comes from comfort or leisure. I think it comes from pursuing ambitious goals.
Mhm.
So only if you try something that you were not able to do it before. Let's give you an example. I'm do now this bodybuilding since almost 50 years. You can see it here in my yes
Wow.
bus. Yeah, yes. And so I'm a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And maybe not in politics and everything, but what I like, he came to the United States speaking no word English, and he set himself the goal to be the biggest bodybuilder of all times. And everyone laughed at him. And it was not easy for him.
Mhm.
But in the end, he reached this goal. He was the biggest bodybuilder ever. And then he said, I want to be a movie star. Forget about it. Your accent, yes, his accent was even stronger than my accent today. How you want to be a movie star? Of course, in the first movies, he had not to talk so much, only maybe I'll be back or something like this. But in the end, he turned out to be one of the best paid movie stars in the world. And then he said he want to go to politics. And I think he even would have run for president, but according to the American Constitution, it's not possible because he's born in Austria, not in the United States. But he became governor of California 2 times. Maybe it was not the best thing he did in his life. But what I want to say, I think this is always to set yourself new big goals, and I think God has given to each of us some talents, and
Mhm.
we shouldn't be. I think it's not God's will that we are lazy lying there on our sofa, but always to look for new things. And this is what I like with Elon Musk. He is also someone to set himself really big goals. And maybe you don't reach every goal in your life, but it's not so important. It's like the song from the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but if you try some time, you get what you need. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe and that's what it is about. If you set yourself a goal, and even for me, someone who always reaches his goal, I call him a loser. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but if you reach every goal, it only shows that you never set your goals high enough. It like when I'm in the gym, for example, bench press, and I would do like 60 kilo. I know it's very easy for me, even on the bench press. Yes, I will not fail, but I will not grow. I
Mhm.
have then take some maybe 100 kilo. Oh, it's so hard. Please help me a bit. Or sometimes I fail. Yes, but this is and but then if you did it, then you are happy. If you do the things that you can't do, like this 10 times 60 kilo easy, I'm not happy after this. But if I'm successful doing something I didn't do, and so it is with my book, for example, I set myself goals. Some years ago, I wrote the book In Defense of Capitalism. And on New Year's Eve, always I write down my goals. And I wrote down the goal, I want this book to be translated in 20 languages. And by then, the book that was translated more often was 12 languages, but over 10 years. And I wrote down, in the next year, I want to sign 20 contracts. I had reached it in June, and then even take entire 30. Today you can buy it in 30 language also. This is what I like, to set yourself big goals and look what talent is in me. And even, I wrote one book that was really not successful, to be honest. But I think the English title is Unbreakable Spirit. It's about it's about disabled people who set themselves big goals, successful disabled people, and you find a lot of truth what they are doing and their attitude. I spoke, for example, with Eric Weinmeier. He's American, and he was the first blind man to climb the Mount Everest. Not only the Mount Everest, he climbed the seven summits, the seven highest mountains in seven continents. And I met one man, he's a friend of mine today. He's born with no arms, but he's one of the best harnessists in the world. And he has a very positive attitude. And I met another one. He's also a friend of mine today. He's almost blind. He's only between 5 and 10%. But he's one of the most successful gallerists in Germany. He opened a gallery being almost
Wow.
blind. And so I admire this kind of people, not the people with this victimhood mentality. Oh,
Right.
I'm a victim. I'm a victim of sexism, and racism, and capitalism. I'm so poor. I blame other people. I blame the rich people. I blame this. No, don't do it. Yes, I think take the responsibility for your success, for your failure, and try to figure out what you can do. And if these people, even disabled people, can reach so much and climb the Mount Everest, what can you do with two eyes and two ears? If Beethoven, who was almost deaf, when he was almost deaf, he
Mhm.
made this Ninth Symphony. Yes, I can hear, you can hear, we can see. What can we do? So these are the questions about meaning of happiness. This was your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a kind of a strange coincidence, but you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger. I became friends with a man who was in the movie Pumping Iron with Arnold. His name was Rick Drayson. Are you familiar with that name?
Rick Trason?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Is also a
So
bodybuilder?
he was a Mr. Olympia, and he was in the movie Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Anyway, long story. I became friends with him, and we wrote a book together. So it's a small
Or can you
world.
repeat his name, maybe the pronunciation?
Rick Drayson, RIC is his first name, and then last name is DRASIN.
Maybe yes, but it was in the 80s, yes?
Yeah. He was on a show here in the United States back in the late 70s called The Incredible Hulk, where
Ah,
Bill Bixby becomes Lou Ferrigno.
Lou Ferrigno, yes.
He was the middle Hulk. They
Ah,
call him
okay.
the Demi Hulk. His name is Rick Drayson. So he was an actor. He was a professional wrestler. He did a lot of things, that would show his body, his bodybuilding. So, but it's a small world. Before we go, Rainer, talk about, do you have any future projects you can discuss? And also, what can people find on your website, Rainer-Zitelmann.com?
Yes, I I already finished my next book. The title is Zero Sum Mindset. I'm just negotiating with publisher. I'm proud that Steve Forbes wrote the preface for this
Wow.
book. I became friend with him a couple of years ago, and he opened a lot of doors for me and helped me because you have to know, as a foreigner, writing books, it's not easy to go to the United States because 97% of all books that are sold in the United States are written by Americans. And
Mhm.
from 1,000 books in German language, only one is translated in English language. So it's really hard. And so I appreciate that I have the opportunity, like in your show now, to talk about this. And I hope that people will be curious and support. And um, I don't want to mention my website, and so yes, you can find there a lot of articles that I'm writing. But I'm happy if people are curious about new space capitalism and
Right.
the other book, 2075. When beauty became a crime, maybe you can. I can send you for the show notes this, but you can find it on Amazon because I think it's important to spread this message about capitalism, because at the universities, at schools, they don't do it. They don't learn anything about socialism. I thought, I'll give you one example. I traveled in 2022 and 23 through 30 countries all over the world to promote my book. And I had a lot of lectures, sometimes only 30 people, sometimes 300, sometimes 3,000. But wherever I've been, in every country, I asked people one question. Have you heard about the biggest socialist experiment in history? This was Mao Zedong's so-called Great Leap Forward between 1958 and 1962. 45 million people died. 45 million people died. You have it I have a book, The Power of Capitalism, the first chapter is about it. And wherever I spoke, whether it was in Chile or in Argentina or Brazil, or I was even in Nepal, Mongolia, and in all European countries. And I asked people who had heard about it. Only very few raised their hands. Maybe when there were 500 people, only 10 people I heard about it. And I was really shocked that they didn't hear about it. Now, I'm a historian, and this is to write about history, and it's so important to know something about history. For example, this book now, there's a leftist economist, her name is Mariana Mazzucato, and she praises always, things done by the state. She says every important things are done by the state, not by entrepreneurs. And as an example, she gives it's the moonshot. Yeah, yes, and I agree. This 10 years with the moon landing, it was a huge success. It's not like I claim that everything that what the government does will fail, but a lot of things failed. But you can talk about 10 successful years, and then she left away the next 50 years that were a total disaster with the space shuttle failure. And I think this is like a gambler who takes some dollars and, oh, I'm a winner. But he doesn't tell you about losing the next 10 times. And so I think, I should write now these chapters about the next 50 years, because people who don't know anything about, oh, yes, moon landing done by the government, we should do everything. Even Richard Nixon thought it. After the moon landing, I have it in my book, he told his employees, now we do, in a similar way, fight against cancer. We will win it, because they thought then the government couldn't do everything. But also this fight against cancer from the government was also a failure. So they thought when it works one time, it will work always. And I showed in my book, no, this is totally wrong. So I really hope if people go there on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, it's also allowed to pre-order 5 or 10 books to give it to your friends.
Yeah.
I would be very happy about it.
Excellent. Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, author of New Space Capitalism and also 2075. Check those books out at Amazon or wherever you buy great books. And Dr. Zitelmann, thank you so much for being my guest this week. I hope I can have you back sometime.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure for me. I appreciate it to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you.